We
Cheers to
too are
that.
men without women. You got to say it.
To men, sin mujeres.
Sin mujeres.
By Hello and welcome to the Damn Venture Podcast, the podcast where we are stopping the flow of BS in the venture capital industry. I'm Andrew Chan. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Vince J. Lopez, who is the founder and CEO of Parker Health. Vince, I'm going to read his bio here off of the website, is a native of Sacramento, California, and is raised in Arlington, Virginia, where he studied English and political science at Indiana University of Pennsylvania. He's also just a very chill dude. He's a Forbes 30 under 30. You know, he's a ordained deacon at Capitol Hill SDA Church, and also loves Formula One, bourbon, horse racing, and just about every other fun, exciting hobby that one could share. The backstory being, I met Vince when I was out at the classic LA Asian hangout, Inner Crew. And this man just shows up. We're all walking. I don't even know where we ended up. We ended up like hunting down a cheesesteak in Koreatown at 11 p.m. at night, something like that.
That's about right.
Anyways, excited to have you on, Vince. Absolute pleasure to have you here, man.
Hey, man, it's good to be on. It's good to reconnect after our adventures of LA. And hopefully a couple more coming up in the next couple weeks.
Couple more coming up. Vibe is on the calendar.
It is, yeah.
I'm not attending. I will be taking meetings, although I don't do a ton of healthcare investing these days. There's another topic that we'll sidebar for offline on that front, which has been an absolute adventure. But today, Vince and I are going to be talking about, well, the high level topic for today is valuations. But the real topic is that venture capital drives high healthcare costs.
Amen.
Now, we're going to backtrack into that because we think that's a pretty bold statement, and you have to establish some amount of credibility before you just say, fuck venture capital, it's driving high healthcare costs.
Right.
Venture capital is the biggest problem in the world. So we're going to get there. There are a lot of other topics we're going to talk about today. Vince, maybe the best place to start, obviously you have a crazy background. You know, I don't meet a lot of other English literature majors. We were joking before the podcast about me having a BS in English literature, which to be honest is quite literally bullshit. But I love to hear in your own words a little bit about your background, sure. What led you to Parker Health, and what created that journey for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's always been about, it's just a liberal arts major in me. We're looking at things from a very high level perspective, really trying to understand what's wrong with our society, what's wrong with our communities, and looking at ways that we can provide an advancement or betterment to it. But look, I've been in healthcare for quite a long time, since I was probably about 15. I volunteered in hospitals, and I was doing things amongst, clinicians and other providers, and wanting to learn. I was always like hands-on, right? I was a guy that was like volunteering at the hospital, and I'm like, hey, so you're the surgeon, like, do you mind if I go in the OR with you to watch you do the surgery, right? And
which technically, I don't know if that's legal.
No, it's definitely not. It's definitely not legal, but because I come to find out there was like all this process, you had to like file paperwork, etc. But like that was my inundation with like healthcare. I had a drive to like be a part of it, and for the longest time, I wanted to be a medical doctor. And at some point I still do, like at some point I still, in my dreams of life, I still want to become a cardiothoracic vascular surgeon.
Oh yeah. Cardiothoracic. Yeah. Like, so, and just for our listeners, my dream later in life is to retire and open a bubble tea store. But this man's going to become a cardiothoracic surgeon. Fair enough. But,
I mean, you get bored in life, so you got to find something to do.
No, you get bored, and so you just go into really high stress, high level surgery.
Look, absolutely. I am fascinated by medicine, and I think for me that's always been my kind of thought behind it. So, going back to when I'm 15, I'm working in these hospitals as a volunteer. I'm like, I was active in high school, active in sports, and all that fun other stuff I was doing, but I was working in a hospital volunteering, like going around, and like by volunteering, I wasn't just like taking towels to people or like giving them water. Like I was actually like monitoring the nurses, like just rolling around with them and like
Yeah,
actually watching them practice and like, push medication
which is also
and ask questions.
a little bit wild that that's what they let volunteers do.
Yeah,
And I was gonna say
there's
similarly,
HIPAA
yeah.
paperwork you have to like complete and things, of course, but
Yeah,
like
no. I volunteered at the Denver Zoo, and they let me basically
not
run
the
an
zoo.
entire section. No. Look, no. Honest to God, like I did the job of a zookeeper, and it sounds like you did a bulk of the job of a nurse at some point.
I wouldn't go
And
that
neither
far,
one
but
of us got
I did have
okay
some interactions. Yes,
a significant supporting role, and neither one of us ended up getting paid for that in any capacity
true,
whatsoever. Because that's how you build a resume to apply to college,
right.
and that's what happens. So yeah,
I'm sure
obviously
like
deep
animal shit
entrenched
and human
background.
shit
Yeah.
is pretty similar, so we're good, right?
I mean, look, I gave medicine to birds, man. I had to. You fucking. This is not super relevant to the podcast, but you would have to go and you'd have to chase down birds,
Uh-huh.
right? And so we'd have these nets, and you'd have 3 keepers and maybe 1 volunteer. You have to quarter this duck into a corner. You net him. You
It
get the
sounds like
little.
this sounds like
You give it
animal
the run.
abuse. This is animal
Yeah,
abuse.
yeah, but like it's the medicine to keep them from getting sick and dying, and so you kind of let it go. Anyways,
Okay, all right. I'm not gonna call SP.
so
What is it?
obviously deep,
SPCA or whatever it's called.
yeah, call the ASPC,
ASPCA. Yeah, yeah, right.
ASPA, yeah, whatever it is. No. So anyways, going back, deep background in medicine.
Yep.
Let's give the quick context on
Sure.
Parker Health,
Yeah.
the vision behind that, and what led you to founding a company versus there are a lot of ways you can impact healthcare. You
Yeah.
can be a healthcare VC, you can be a regulator, you could have gone and got a medical degree and practiced.
I could have.
Why did you decide that founding a company was the most impactful way to affect the community here?
I think in looking at my professional career, kind of in the healthcare space, I recognized and realized a lot of the flaws and kind of loopholes that have consistently been used as ways to leverage organizational benefit over patients. And so that for me is what really bothered me. And I will say that I started working on this like concept of Parker Health and overall concept of what I wanted to build probably in about the 7th grade. I was originally going to run for political office.
Deep cuts, man.
Deep
it's
cuts,
like,
deep cuts, but
deep cuts. You're like, oh
was,
man, should I ask Stacey Johnson to the enchantment under the sea dance?
Yeah,
Should
right. Or should I like write a manifesto?
Or should I found this company?
Yeah. So I would say like I've always been very ambitious and very driven to want to make an impact in the world. And so I flash back to 7th grade because it's always kind of my preemptive start to everything I started to do. I wrote this life goals, right, on this spreadsheet that I've updated probably 3 times since I wrote it. And I have checked off pretty much every box on that. But in addition to that, I wrote a manifesto because I was like, I grew up in Washington, D.C., right? I'm from California originally.
Yeah.
Moved to Washington. I was a kid of a political family, right? Still very heavily involved in American politics. And that was kind of my calling, right? And I think if you ask anybody today walking down the street who knew me in elementary, high school, etc., they would say he's running for government. He's going to run for Congress. He's going to run for president. He's going to run for like, spaceman on Mars. Like it doesn't matter.
Which you may not be old enough to run for president yet,
right?
But just know that in what is it, 7 years,
about
8 years?
I'll be 30 in August. About 6 years.
Oh no shit!
Yeah, I'll be about 6 years.
6 years. 6 years. You have my vote when you run for president.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
So,
it means a lot coming from you, Andrew.
Thank you, Vince.
I value that. I expect you on the campaign trail, as a stump
don't
speech,
worry. I will. I'll be the Vivek Ramaswamy to your Donald Trump.
Oh Jesus,
that's all.
It's terrible. It's terrible.
All right,
you gotta like awkwardly.
We're having a little bit too much fun.
You gotta awkwardly hug me for like 15 minutes on the stage after you pledge support.
Refocus.
But where I was going with this in terms of why I started a company was really around I realized a lot of the issues, as I had mentioned previously, and I was looking at ways that things could be different. So seventh grade, I'm working on this manifesto. I'm going to run for office. Here's my political manifesto. How do we balance the economy? How do we create healthcare that works? And healthcare at the time, for the last 20, 30 years, really now at this point, since 1992, healthcare has been at the forefront of a lot of what we're looking at in the United States in terms of what's covering costs, what is driving up economic valuation and GDP, et cetera.
Absolutely.
And if you look at our historical financials as a country, healthcare and defense are our number two. Those are our top two in the world. And so that for me was like, okay, defense, I could justify, I could understand, I could grasp why that was so expensive, right? R&D, everything in between it, got it. What I couldn't understand is why healthcare was so high up on the list, right? Because I'm going, healthcare is amazing. There's so many cool things that are working on. There's so many things happening, but why is it so expensive? And what I came to realize was that it wasn't so much that the cures and the medications and the services that we were rendering were that expensive for individuals. It was all of the underlying cost that was being brokered behind the scenes that was inflating that so high that by the time it went to market and that we as users had to purchase this service and our medication and our product, it was 10 times the cost, right? So my 50-cent pill that was made by Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, whoever, is now on the market for me to get filled at CVS. It was $70, right? And or more, depending on that type of drug.
That's why you see the huge insulin costs.
Oh, yeah.
The pushback on all of the above.
Right. Yeah.
Also,
and this is all underlying.
We're going to pause
costs.
really quickly.
Yeah, sure.
I have a Amazon device that's going off in the background here.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, shit. Alexa, stop. Those pieces of shit. I had an alarm set for 8:30 in the morning, and apparently that was going off. Luckily, this podcast records separate audio files for you and for me.
Excellent.
And so we're in good shape. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought. We're continue to pick off where we were.
Yeah, we were talking about these like inflated prices and the healthcare costs. Like,
inflated prices, everything is a little bit absurd.
Yeah.
And so let's, obviously you're far more experienced in healthcare than I am. And
Sure.
I will say this up front that I am not a healthcare investor. I have one investment in the space, which I made because I understand AI and I know what good applications of AI are and bad applications of AI. But frankly speaking, I have no idea how to commercialize that product, and I should not be helping them on that front. What you're doing is fairly technical from what you would consider a healthcare side. And so when you think about the core underlying cost drivers, what are you isolating, and what do you think really ends up, causing people to be unable to afford critical medications that they need?
But it's simple. Yeah, it's GPOs, group purchasing organizations, and PBMs, pharmacy benefit managers. That drive costs up. And the reason why is that they're a middleman, right? So they're brokering between the hospital, the patient, and the provider. And I can kind of give you a breakdown of this, and I'll try to narrow this down as quickly as I can. But essentially, when a hospital stands up, most hospitals in this country are nonprofit organizations, right? And then you have...
Interesting. I do know several for-profit hospitals too.
Oh, yeah.
Which is crazy, yeah.
And most of them have a double conundrum to them, where they have a for-profit version and a nonprofit version.
Right.
And what they do essentially is that you have a hospital group that's doing X, and they're providing the hospital system, the hospital services. Then they contract out to the middleman of a PBM or a GPO to fulfill the services. So we need to order gloves, we need to order materials, we need to order pharmaceutical material. We would order through a GPO and a PBM, right? Versus going through direct wholesale to a manufacturer to get that product. What happens is that when I purchase that product from a GPO or a PBM, my markup is another 7 to 15%, sometimes more, just depending on what's being serviced.
Those guys have to pay for their Maserati, right?
Of course.
Easy way to do
Absolutely.
that, yeah.
but they've obviously got their product on wholesale pricing, right? So they've gotten that pill or they've gotten that glove box or whatever they've ordered at wholesale price. And so what that does is that's a pass-through cost that has to be expended to the patient, right? So this is why when you go to the hospital, you have a $10,000 bill. I mean, you could have gone to like an island, in the middle of the Caribbean for a vacation for the price you'd pay to stay in a hospital for 2 nights, right?
Yeah. No. And I mean, I think that brings up an interesting point where this is a very strictly US problem, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a reason that medical tourism as an industry has taken off.
Yep.
And, people fly. I mean, fuck it. Like I've considered if I ever start losing my hair, the first thing I do is I book a flight to Turkey and you get that hair transplant. Yeah, Istanbul.
Right. Of course.
You do what you gotta do.
Right.
But the entire reason that's taken off is the US is uniquely screwed up in this sense where they drive obscenely high healthcare costs. Thinking about like what are the incentives? Obviously the GPO needs to make money. They need to, buy whatever they need to buy. But what are the incentives broadly for this structure and what underlies that in general?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the way that our Affordable Care Act is written. Policy is really what matters and dictates a lot of this. You look at the Affordable Care Act, you look at the CARES Act that was in 2021. You look at the reverberage of that in 2022. Those are what dictate pricing, right? You look at Medicare, Medicaid fee schedules, right, that come out every July and June. You're looking at that and you're looking and saying, this is what's driving up those costs. And a lot of it comes down to policy, right? You have states that administer Medicaid and Medicare services on behalf of the federal government, right? Contrary to popular belief, right? People are like, oh, the government controls Medicare, Medicaid. They do. But what happens is that Medicare, Medicaid monies are delivered to the states, and then the states choose how they spread that money across the table. And it's become a political pawn now, depending on who's in office, Republican or Democrat, doesn't really matter. Where,
well, to be fair, everything's a political pawn.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, it is. Yeah. It's sad. It really is sad. But what that does is that they're looking at ways that we're expanding Medicare, not expanding it, and so what they're saying is that we're not going to expand Medicare, Medicaid. And why does that matter to us? What matters to us in many respects, because what Medicare, Medicaid does is it sets kind of the foundational baseline of where we can go in terms of pricing, right? And in terms of where we're servicing and who's being serviced and how they're being serviced. And that's what it does. And people don't really understand that from an understanding of, even though I'm paying for a private insurer, right? Private insurers are mirroring what Medicare and Medicaid is doing to deliberate what their rates are going to be, right? So you're wondering why a Medicare visit perhaps is $45 for a primary care visit. What my private insurance is probably free for the first 2 visits, right? It's part of their, we're doing good.
I mean, so it depends.
But then it's
you're generally,
right?
$100, yeah.
And so you got to look at it. You got to understand the policy behind it. And so when I'm looking at a lot of this, I'm looking at it from a political and a policy perspective, because that's the only way to really understand overall a foundational understanding of the Ponzi scheme that's being built, right? Because you're constantly robbing Peter to pay Paul. And you're hiding in tax havens as nonprofit entities to circumvent the process. And when you look at this, you think about, like, how is Blue Cross Blue Shield? How is Humana? How is everybody else a private insurer? A publicly traded entity? How?
Well, and some of them are massive.
United $1 billion in valuation.
Absurdly.
Billions of dollars in cash flow. Billions of dollars in every retrospect. And you're just like, but I thought you were a nonprofit, right? Like, are you
but that's not how that works. Nothing's ever a nonprofit.
Nothing's ever a nonprofit. And that's the piece that people don't realize, is that because it is a nonprofit, they get away with murder, right? And all they've done is essentially made all of these flow down organizations, state by state, location by location, that administer the nonprofit services, right? But their parent company, who's the holding firm, is the asset that's trading on the market, right? And that is that's what makes
the absurdity
the circle
of the whole
go full circle for them.
Right. Makes the circle do the circle thingy.
That thing, right. Exactly.
So one of the interesting things that you highlighted when we were doing our, and to be honest, it's fairly minimal show prep.
Yep.
Was that there's a vicious cycle in here especially around technology and technology innovation,
Yeah.
where it's actually venture capital that drives a lot of high healthcare costs in these
Hmm.
states, in
Hmm.
these systems. I'd love if you could explain a little bit more about that and specifically what you meant, because frankly, I do not know personally,
Sure.
right? Like, I see VCs do dumb shit every single day,
Yeah, we all
but
do.
I don't know how that affects healthcare costs. I can certainly tell you how it affects my IRR and any other random venture capital
Sure.
acronyms you'll throw out there. But in terms of specifically the healthcare lens, what does venture capital do to drive up healthcare costs?
Yeah, I think the big thing for venture capital is what's being used in terms of leverage in the
Yeah,
industry. One thing about venture capital is that they're very into the sexy products, use cases that can make a lot of money today. But healthcare investment is very different than your traditional e-commerce or commerce market. It's very different. It's a long-term play. The investment you're making
sure. Yep.
is not going to make you 10x in return tomorrow. But you're talking about $1 trillion industry that it is at some point, it's going to make you billions of dollars almost overnight. But you've got to understand what's going on in it. And so when you look at venture capital in today's environment of healthcare, is that they don't understand the domain space, right? And so they're investing in companies that are fly by night, one hit wonders that sound cool. They do something really cool, right? And you take something as cool as like AI, machine learning, that's as basic as it comes, right? And let's just say
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
it can generate, a auto-dictated note from a doctor, right? Like, oh my God, that's amazing. This is profound. The problem
Yeah,
is that that's great. But what about like understanding how electronic health records work? How does qualified health integrated networks work? How does all of this work where we're moving patient data? How does that work? And how does your product
right.
overlay into that? And if it does overlay, does it make sense? Does it fit for a long-term play? And that's the issue with venture capital, where we're just throwing money away at these really cool ideas, really cool
Short term.
innovation that's very short term, but it's not going to
Right.
integrate long term with an Epic or a Cerner or EHR or Parker Health's EHR or
So
whatever.
which is yeah, which is a fascinating spot for you to play
Sure,
in. And I was going to say that there have been, I did a little bit of healthcare investing. It was part of our thesis at Builders, not the part that I led.
sure.
And but countless companies would come into me saying, we're going to replace Epic. We're
Is it?
going
Is it?
to bridge that. And a lot of what you're isolating here is that that's a very short term view. Like, there are technology innovations, but that doesn't really understand the system.
Right,
And for me, what that comes down to, and something that we've talked about, is that VCs don't really understand math,
right.
in that they are isolating for MOIC,
Hmm.
or multiple uninvested capital,
Yep,
instead of DPI.
yep.
So your actual
Absolutely.
realized returns are the DPI. Especially in healthcare, when you think about where that affects you, you recently raised a funding round. How did you have to adjust your storytelling? How
Yeah.
did you make your opportunity at Parker Health sound like what would generate that MOIC that a lot of venture
Yeah.
capitalists are looking for?
Yeah, a lot of it is education. It's just like going to market with selling a product to a hospital system or a physician's group. It's a lot of education. And in terms of raising around, as in the venture space, we're always raising, right? And you
Hey,
always
well, okay. Look. But
look. We're
that's
not, we're not,
so
we're
actually,
not pitching, but I'm just making the point of like this is the kind of
no,
concept you have to do when you're going to sell this, right? And that
yeah.
storytelling.
And I will say that not every startup views it that way. And this is
Yeah,
actually something we can sidebar here.
sure.
That some of the best advice that we can give to CEOs is that no matter who you're meeting or what conversation you're having, your CEO has two jobs, and that's
Hmm.
fundraising and hiring.
Yep,
Every person you meet could be a fit for one of those
absolutely.
two. And you are always fundraising. Even if you closed your Series A yesterday,
Right.
you are fundraising for the Series B,
Yep.
because these processes take a lot of time.
Right.
And not a lot of people understand that in venture, especially, that time will murder you,
Yeah, it will.
where you will run out of money. Like,
Yeah.
straight up, you'll run out of
You
money.
will run literally out of cash. You will also push yourself up against the wall in terms of expectations from your current investors. And there's a lot of, I mean, there's so much, I mean, you want to talk about politics, there's a lot of politics in between all of this that you have to finesse, that is stressful. But, I think in terms of, back to your kind of original point, when you're talking about storytelling, there's a lot of re-education, especially in our space, right? What we do at Parker is very different.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
We're building electronic health records. We're integrating true artificial intelligence, machine learning, computational medicine, right? Computational engineering to what our product does. We're integrating all of the traditional middleman processes you would think of in a healthcare system into one EHR that makes sense, right? Where today, like our competitors, they were just a glorified billing system, which was the only reason they were used, right? Oh, we can streamline billing from any perspective, right? We can get ICD-10s and 9s and all this stuff into one platform. Okay, great.
Wait. So I'm gonna.
Sure.
What is an ICD-10 or 9? And let's explain So, just for the purpose of we have an audience here that's largely
you're like huh?
not healthcare investors. You're like, anytime you threw around jargon, and I try to watch myself doing this too, because there are a lot of something that VCs broadly love are abbreviations.
Yeah, of course.
We love putting stuff into random ass acronyms that make no sense whatsoever 99% of the time. And then everybody just name drops these. And I remember 4 years ago, I was an analyst at Riot Ventures. People were name dropping acronyms. I'm sitting over here on one computer. And so I've got my computer, my external monitor, and I'd, look into the computer, and my touch typing handing comes in handy. And I touch type, and I'm like, well, these are the acronyms. Anyways, sorry, going back.
Yeah.
So what do you actually mean by that?
All right. So like your ICD-10 codes are your international classification of disease codes. So there's an international committee that comes together and puts all these together, and they are your billing codes and or your classification codes. We use them as billing codes here in the U.S. So Medicare, Medicaid uses them to align them with billables. They also align them with other types of coding. So ICD-10 are your traditional, and you got procedure codes. Then you've got SNOMED and Lyonic, which are now the new international kind of model of what ICD-10 is now. It's going to be moving into that kind of perspective over the next several years. And what they are is just basically all of your disease codes and procedure codes, right? And this is for us anywhere in the world, essentially, to be able to say, oh, I know what that code is. This guy has X problem, right? Or I know what this is. This person has X issue. And so that's what it's used for today. The problem with them is that they're updated as quickly as they can be updated, but in the U.S., we have
so not fast. Basically, is what
it's bureaucratic. It's bureaucratic. It's part of the process. But in the U.S., we then have additional billing codes that we use, right? So we have your traditional ICD-10 and ICD-9 codes that we use, but then we also move into specific codes that are specific to programs, like RPM codes, right? Remote physiological monitoring codes, RTM, remote therapeutic monitoring codes, right? These are different code structures that are being used for different procedures, different billables, different everything, interactions that I have. And then you move into a different layer of that, of like hospital groups and physician groups having their own internal codes that they use to classify what they've completed or done. And so there's all of these different layers that you have to build through and go through to really get a granular understanding. But within our platform, we enable ourselves to do that because we're using the AI machine learning to align what's being done in a code perspective as to what's being done in a procedure perspective to say, okay, actually, this person really did have an operation, or this person really did have this medication.
Right.
So this makes sense. Right. And it's all about crosswalking that within the use of AI and machine learning. So
right. And that's where you play in. It's an effective niche to slot into.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, I know that for you, it was not always a easy fundraising process.
Yeah. Nothing's ever easy.
Well, so where do you think? Once you hit Series B, hopefully people just index on your financial metrics and it'll be okay.
Hopefully, we'll see. Hope and pray.
What do you think the people who passed at you at the pre-seed, the people who didn't get the business initially, where have you succeeded and what didn't they understand about your business?
I think truthfully, they didn't understand how we fit in terms of our relationships with our competitors, right? You think of
Right.
Oracle Cerner now, which used to be Cerner, now Oracle Cerner. You think of Epic, you think of Allscripts, you think of Meditech, you think of go down the line with the rest of them, right? Athena.
Yeah.
And you think of those guys and you're going, okay, these guys have been around for 30 years, right? They've been in the industry for 30 years, sometimes more. But then you also realize that most of these groups are owned by larger parent organizations within the overall healthcare vortex, right? That have control over them, where you're going,
yeah,
how the hell is this little dude from around the corner going to break into a market where you've got all of these guys engaged that are controlling that industry? And that was our big red flag to the industry in terms of venture capital. Say, what the heck?
right.
The other piece was that what makes your product better, right? How are you better than them, right? How do you service them better? Because we are an electronic health record platform. That's fundamentally how we started.
Yeah, you are another EHR.
We are
in many ways,
but we're more than an EHR. We are everything that your EHR should and want to be, right? And where it should have began.
Yeah.
You've got the artificial intelligence. You've got the use of machine learning. You've got your revenue cycle management integrated, e-prescribing, care journey.
You could almost say that you're a
tech-enabled
EHR.
We're fully tech-enabled EHR.
Yeah, fully.
We're the only cloud-based, true novel cloud-based platform, right? Like that's actually built in the cloud, not just like we've created an API with AWS.
Yeah, not just we put our documents on Apple iCloud.
Yeah, right.
And we're
exactly.
gonna run it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But what I will say is what makes us very different is that the way that we went after kind of what we did and trying to sell this to venture capital was very difficult because they weren't understanding what we were saying. I realized that I couldn't go out and go take over the large healthcare system tomorrow that's been on Epic for 20 years. Why? I'll give you two reasons. One, most of these large healthcare systems have spent billions of dollars on their platforms already, right?
If not more than that.
If not more than
that.
That's I mean, the average implementation for an Epic or a Cerner today is over 1.5 billion, right? And you're looking at that, you're going, this is absolutely this is asinine, completely asinine. But when you look at that, that was one of the issues. The other piece was the implementation process. Some of these guys have 5 to 10 year contracts, which means that their implementation probably takes about 1 year to 2 years, maybe more, depending on what they're doing. So how am I going to come in and say, like, one, we can cut costs for you guys by almost about 60% in total cost of your EHR, but two, we can also do our implementation in about 2 weeks to 6 months, depending on what we're doing, right? And how do I tell them that when they've just spent billions of dollars and they've been in implementation phase for 2 to 3 years with this company that they spent billions of dollars with? And that's somebody's job. Somebody's CFO, CMO, whatever is going to be fired. Or two, they're looking at you and they're going, this just sounds completely unrealistic, right? But what they're not understanding is that things have changed. The standards have changed. The policies have changed. The regulations have changed. And so that's the way that I approached our go-to-market was, I don't want to be worried about replacing a hospital system with our platform today, right? I've never been that person that's been driven on ROI today. And I say that cautiously because most venture capital will be like, why? That's crazy. Why would you not? But I recognize that I'm playing chess and not checkers here with this process, because anything that we want to do has to require some level of policy and regulatory change. And so that's what we did. We went after that.
And so you went on the policy side.
And we went on the policy side.
You've isolated two things here. And we're going to circle back on the fundraising process, the idea of exclusivity among VCs, because I think that's a really interesting spot there where oftentimes there's weird dynamics that even when you have a good product, you have all of the right metrics, you've got a great looking deck, you're still not really easily able to sell your product to VCs.
Right.
So we'll get back to that. The other thing that I think is really interesting about how you've approached this problem and how I approach a lot of investing personally is the idea of policy and policy first. So what inspired you to think of approaching healthcare from a policy angle? I mean, obviously there are the macros, but not everybody thinks about how the macros impact their specific niches And what do you think the next 5 to 10 years look like, regardless of who's in the office in 2024?
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
I know that's a loaded
That's a
question,
very
but
loaded
yeah,
question.
that's
What inspired the policy piece was one, I mean, I'm a victim of loving what I love as policy, right? But
yeah,
I've also been raised in it. And I realized that there's two very highly regulated markets in the United States, healthcare and finance. And those two
yep,
always require some level of policy integration at some point. And for me, I realized that that was the only thing that was going to actually differentiate us from the rest of the rest of the block here. Right. Okay, cool. You're a cool HR. You do really cool things. You have really cool UX, UI.
yeah,
Amazing. Right. You look 30 times better than an Epic or a Cerner product. Cool. But the product itself is what not defines us. It's the regulation side. We're the only cloud-based technology, right? Everything that's come out in the regulatory perspective is focused on cloud-based technology. We know that our competitors are not cloud-based technologically advanced, right? Because they're on-prem regulations that they've been following for 30 years, right? The other piece we also realize is that in order to integrate AI, machine learning, all this computational medicine or engineering within this, you need to have a cloud-based system to handle that, right?
yep,
Because you can't go and do this at every on-prem setting. The other piece of that is that you're also looking at how regulation works in terms of data and sharing. If I can't share my data between you and I because we have a hard on-prem setting, then how am I going to use
right,
this interoperability piece that the government's asking us to do? You just can't. It's impossible. And so we used all of these pieces as our advantageous piece to say, this is what differentiates us. This is what makes us different. And the policy and the regulation behind it is what's driven that. And so we've worked closely.
right,
Personally, we have worked very closely with the Office of the National Healthcare Coordinator. We've also worked very closely with high tech, with the IEEE, with members of
yep,
the NIH. I mean, all of these major stakeholders, the Sequoia Project, everybody who's been trying to look
yeah,
at interoperability, that's looking at patient use case data, we've looked at them and worked with them for the last 3 years to like try to justify ways that we could become much more advantageous and much more used in what we're doing. And so that's the way we approached it. And these stakeholders are all very much supportive in terms of what we're doing because they're realizing that, yeah, in order for any of this to really work, you have to have a novel product that's built within these parameters. It can't just be built as you're flying the car down the road, even though in many cases that's what we're doing, right? But we're novelly based in terms of where we're built.
Well,
Okay,
so I think you're being a little humble about this in some senses. And for the audience broadly,
sure,
there are very few startups who consider policy and macroeconomics and macro political dynamics in their approach to the business.
sure,
And that leads to an interesting dynamic where oftentimes startups will fail not because they have the wrong product, but because they have the wrong approach for the time that they're in to solve the right problem.
okay.
And I think it's pretty unique how you're approaching that from a very like almost lawmaking sense in a lot of ways where you are at the forefront of tackling those problems. All right, so we're going to go back to the VC circle just because in the interest of time, and we do have to wrap this by a reasonable hour for both of us, although, you know, it is technically 10:30 in the morning.
You can go somewhere to be.
You know, I've got, what? Oh, no. Okay, yeah, no, we're good. So anyways, that to say that something that you and I really align on are that VC should be less exclusive than it is.
Yeah.
I'd love in your words, like, obviously I have my own thoughts about why VC is exclusive. What do you think drives, more than anything, venture capital allocations going in the wrong directions? And how have you seen that through your journey at Parker Health?
Yeah, you know, I think there's so many ways to go after this, and I'm going to try to be as politically correct as I can.
Wait, hold up here. The entire point of this podcast is to be. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay.
Kidding.
All right.
I'm totally kidding.
I'll do that.
Cheers, right? Exactly. No,
Yeah, I
I
mean
am.
it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It is indeed, at least in London. But what I will say is this, I think for so long, society, the markets have been obsessed with venture capital and private equity. So much so that that's all they look at. And it's become an exclusive club, right? And I think what you have to look back is you have to go back to the start of the .com era and move into kind of this tech era where Facebook and Twitter became the next big giants after that full .com era that is really dictated where venture capital is looking. It's a club. It's an exclusive club. It is a not what you know, but who you know, and truly is what it really comes down to. And you're also looking at who they're investing in, right? What are the type of persons that they're investing in? And it's
there's a great quote.
Belief.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's your quote? I'm curious.
Oh, no. So I don't know if I should be bringing this up on here, but a good buddy of mine, Zavendar, who used to be at Lux, he's running his own fund now. He was on Samir Kaji's podcast, Venture Unlocked, and he said that venture capital is stale, pale, frail, and male and white.
Yeah, right.
Just through that last one. Yeah, which is like when we talk about exclusive clubs, you and I had a great conversation before the podcast about Club 33 and some of the other really
Solo
random
House and all those other random clubs.
Yeah, I mean, that people are part of for no reason in particular. And I completely agree that venture capital is that club. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that way. And I'm not sure how much you see this, but for me, I see a lot of business bros who fit the profile of what an ideal venture capitalist is. And so they get jobs in venture, but they don't have the skills to operate. And like, venture is not the industry it used to be. Like, you can't just insider trade your way to a fortune. Like, you have to be responsible with your investments. You have to understand markets.
Yeah, you do. And that's the biggest issue, right? None of these investor groups are a domain expert on hand, right? They are just folks that have a lot of powder or access to a lot of powder and they can deploy.
Well, yeah, I mean, right now more than ever. You're starting to see the Series B come back, and that's ridiculous. It's crazy.
But when you're looking at this, you're just going, that's a big concern to me, because when you're looking at this exclusive club you've created, it's not even based on an individual's criteria or credentials anymore. It's just kind of where, if we like you and you're a bro, you're going to get a check, right?
Well, and so interesting to isolate that you have to be a bro. Like, you have to play the bro games.
Yeah.
I have ended up on countless evenings where I would really, like, I'm not that extroverted, and I'd really rather not be drinking. Actually, the night we met was a night where, like, I did not want to go out that night whatsoever.
Yeah.
But you have to do it because you never know who you're going to meet on the other side.
Right.
And you have to bro up. You have to drink. You have to say the right things. You have to play in the fantasy football leagues. And God damn it, fuck Travis Kelce for screwing me over this year.
Sorry.
Dude, killer. In the playoffs, I was the number 1 seed in the playoffs. Travis Kelce shit the bed. Yeah. Anyways,
Taylor Swift,
it is this exclusivity. What I think this may end up getting cut. There's a small chance I end up flying to Singapore next month to go see Taylor Swift in Singapore for a second time. Eras Tour hits, man.
Swiftie?
My favorite Taylor Swift song is Back to December. Taylor Swift got me through a lot of hard breakups when I was younger. She still gets me through a lot of hard breakups. There's some times in life where you just need a little bit of country sad feels.
I need some more bourbon on this note, but continue.
So anyways, what I was going to get to is that you end up with this group of people who look and can talk the talk, but they can't always understand that, like, the game isn't itself. And so we mentioned really early in the podcast the concept of valuations. And in healthcare especially, this is a particularly salient issue where I have seen just broadly throughout the industry, there's a lot of dumbass shit, but healthcare especially has a lot of things where, like, you can't back up the valuation.
No.
Now, you as an entrepreneur how do you think about the concept of valuation? How do
So
you set the price you raise at? How did you isolate a lead? And what were the considerations you had when you were going through that process?
I think the number one consideration, obviously, as a founder, is your ownership in the stake still, right?
Yeah, of course.
Not
Yeah. No,
not
obvious.
selling out your ownership. However, the other piece that's very important is, for me at least, is do you understand, do you respect, do you value the mission? And I think that's really what matters to me. As they say, not all good money is good money. And
Yep.
not all money is worth taking, and you at some point as a
Most
founder,
money is not worth taking, and
this
I
is
will tell
true.
you that from experience
This
there.
is
Yeah.
true. This is true. But, and I think the thing for me, though, is that you've got to treat your investors like you would an employee in many respects, right?
Yeah.
You've got to interview them. Um, you've got to engage. You've got to understand where they're coming from and do they recognize where you're coming from, right? It's not a hookup, right? This is a long-term engagement. And I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to put it. You've got to really be smart. The other piece that's important with it is that you've also got to think about, is this company being overvalued, right? Is my company being
Right.
overvalued? And am I going to be able to deliver at that capacity, right? And let's just call it what it is. Valuation is bullshit, right?
Oh, it's
Valuation
absolutely made it.
is made up.
Valuation is
Right?
bullshit.
It's bullshit.
It's
I
fucking
mean,
made up.
yeah.
At the seed round,
Yeah,
the real process
not
you go
even the
through to
seed round. I
value a
mean, you could
company.
go to
No,
pre-seed.
I
but
mean,
yeah,
even the Series A, even beyond.
yeah,
So what you do until there's real revenue coming in the
yeah.
door that you can run a DCF on
You're right.
is you take the amount of money that they're raising as a company. You say, is this company, do they actually need this amount of money? If
Right.
so, what is 20 to 33% dilution?
Yep.
Do the long division,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like it's not a science, it's an art
It's an art
form.
form.
And then you say, look, maybe you're not worth raising $10 million. I'm going to propose that you raise 8 at a lower valuation.
Yep.
And do you see that all the time? Valuations fucking
But
made up.
again, this is why we have this problem in our economy today where we are bubbled, right? Everybody's like, oh, we've got so much student debt. Oh, we've got so much personal medical credit debt, whatever. And it's like, no, it's not that. It's the fact that the markets are driving the market the way they're driving by the fact that we've got these overvalued companies that are publicly traded and privately held.
Absolutely.
And they're funded by a spinoff of some venture group that's a publicly traded entity, right? And so that's why our market is the way it is. But when you look at the valuation piece, for me, it's like, I'm more concerned of like, one, are you overvaluating me because you're trying to hit an ROI point, right, in 5 years or in 2 years or whatever?
Yeah, of course.
Right. 2, are you overvaluating me because you're trying to bring in other investors, and the only way that you can convince those other investors for Series B, C, and beyond is by providing this valuation? And then 2, what is kind of your exit strategy? And majority of the time that you have a high valuation that's without reason, there's an exit strategy for them, not for you. Right.
Yeah.
And that's
exactly
the part that people
secondary
don't
sales.
realize. Yeah.
VCs can always get out.
Absolutely.
Like, there is always I hesitate to say this, but there's always dumber money than you,
Yes.
no matter how dumb you are, right? Where there's somebody who will buy your shares of a quickly failing company because they've still got the branding and the brand recognition, and they're like, oh, I want to buy. I had to catch myself. I was about to name a specific company. I'm going to buy XYZ company here.
Right.
And as its valuation falls, because I know it, I see it in the news.
Yeah, right.
I've seen it all the time. And
right.
and
the
so,
whole
but as a founder, you're fucked.
of buy low, sell high, right? Like it's that whole ethos that's coming to fruition again, that we are realizing that it makes sense, but what you're really doing is you're affecting the overall industry. And I think that's the big thing in the healthcare space, where you're seeing it in all industry. But if you're looking at healthcare specifically, you're looking at all these major groups that are buying up health groups, right? Look at HCA, look at HCSA, like look at all of these big conglomerates that have bought up every private practice that has been privately owned, that have bought up every major, outpatient facility. And you're looking at it, you're going, this is crazy. And this is really the reality of like why healthcare is so expensive. It has nothing to do with the delivery, the quality, or anything. It's all focused on revenue generating profit. That's it. And exceeding profit margin. That's it. There's nothing else there. And so when you look at kind of why I look at valuation differently, I look at it very differently because let's just hypothetically say, I'm not going to get into our personal finances here as a company.
Yes, of course. As frankly, we shouldn't.
Yeah, of course.
Let's say you'd raise.
But let's just say that I raised, $10 million, right? On a $10 million raise, my valuation should probably be like 1 times that, 2 times that. Okay.
Yeah. Should, but I mean, realistically, you'll probably get
raise $10 million, and I can get a $100 million valuation.
20 right. to, I mean, Jesus Christ, the dumber people in this industry.
Yeah,
I mean, so I've had to start pointing this out on Twitter when I see it.
Sure,
because I saw an AI company that raised a 60x revenue multiple. Right. I saw the fucking PGA, the Professional Golfers Association, raise $3 billion at 12 billion, or not 12 billion. It was 1 at 12, whatever it was. It was like a 6-7x valuation on the revenue multiple for a company that is not really profitable.
Right.
And it's the PGA.
Yep.
The Live Tour is killing them. Yep. Like, people just there's too much money to go around.
No, I agree.
All right. So on that happy note, we're gonna segue into the tail end of this podcast, which are the 3 questions that we ask every person who comes on here.
I haven't got to slam minority investment groups yet.
Shit. All right. We may have to table that because we are about at time.
All right.
Give the 2-second version, 30 seconds.
All right, 30 seconds.
I would like to slam minority investment groups because I'm a minority and people pretend
as a minority.
I'm actually a minority. My family's been in this goddamn country since 1904.
Yeah.
I am more American than Donald Trump in every sense of the word. And people try to say I'm a minority and allocate capital.
Yeah.
Vince,
but
2-minute soapbox, slam your minority investment groups.
Slam your minority investment group. It's a facade, people, right? Like, it really is truly a facade. They always, when I look at venture impact, venture groups that are doing social impact investing, I always chuckle because I go, you're really not doing anything within that space to help these people. And I will tell you this, as a minority, as a Mexican American, I have been in rooms with Latino focused venture groups or venture groups that have relationships or
as we all have.
Right. And I have been strategically passed over because I am not, my counterpart, a white male dominant male, right? Like, that is the reality. And for me, like, that bothers me because when you're looking at minority groups and you're looking at all of this kind of perspective of it, we're supposed to be helping each other and building our communities and doing X, Y, and Z. And we constantly just build each other up and then we tear each other right down, right? And it's not like I was ever going to seek these people to get investment. They found me.
Yeah.
And we had the meeting.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think for me, like, I think the story behind social impact and being, a diversity based fund, and we're focused on, BIPOC community, etc. I laugh at all of them because they're not doing any of that. They have maybe 1 to 2 major investments that are in that space, and then everything else is kind of like high at the ceiling, right? They're just throwing money at something and seeing if it hits. And so I have so many issues with that. So please, if you have a fund that does social impact investing in minority or BIPOC community, whatever you want to like put the political correct language around, make investments in those communities and in those people, right? Believe in those people because they believe in what your mission is saying and what your impact is stating when you look on your websites and you're looking at your speeches and your monologues and whatever else you're doing, right? They're looking at that and they're resisting the urge to not want to say anything to you because they don't want to risk the fact that they might lose an opportunity to be funded. But in reality, you're just looking over them. So please be sincere with what you're saying in terms of investment. And I think that's across the board in terms of investment.
No. That's in terms of thesis. And you've picked up on something that I love to talk about, which is that venture capital theses are made up.
Oh, yeah. They're
And then
ChatGPT like 5 minutes.
they're fundraising gimmicks
Yeah, right.
where your venture capital fundraising thesis is a gimmick.
Yeah.
Unless you put it in the LPA and you have, sorry, the limited partnership agreement,
Thank you. Yeah, I was
and
going
you
to
have a
break it down.
covenant around what you can or cannot invest in,
Yep.
and you have a bar for how many dollars you have to invest in each sector, your thesis is made up.
Yeah.
Like, you can invest in whatever you want. Your LPs will never bat their eye because, like, look, you could invest in me and pretend that I'm BIPOC, but like, again, my family's been here since 1904.
Sure.
I'm as American as sliced bread and American cheese, and that's the literal.
I mean,
like, you can look up when American cheese was
sixth
invented.
generation, but like I'm still Latino,
Yeah,
and I'm still. And I think you're,
but that's
But still, yeah.
But
I agree.
it's like there are people who actually need those dollars on the diversity investment and who are facing barriers because of their background and where they come from.
Yep.
And not enough people actually allocate there. Even like I've seen a lot of agriculture investors stretch their thesis, go someplace else. If you're gonna say you're investing in agriculture, invest in goddamn agriculture. Go out to the farm. Go milk a cow. Go get your artificial insemination license. I don't know why that came up because I looked at doing this. It's like $200. You can take a week-long course.
Right.
But like, be real.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think that's what we're asking broadly is to be real.
Just be real.
Venture capital.
Right. Just be straight up. Right. Stop using us as pawns to accelerate your ability to fulfill
your own fundraising.
And to do the opposite of it. Also, if you're going to be in a domain space, like just while we're on this, like, have understanding and know-how and knowledge of that domain.
Yeah, but nobody does that, man. I've been investing in mining since 2020.
Of course.
I am the only person with a degree in geology or geophysics investing in mining in the United States of America, which is ludicrous. So, all right. Okay.
All right.
That's our soapbox.
Soapbox done.
3 questions. Number 1, what company, publicly or privately traded, do you want to see fail and why?
God, this is a loaded question, sir.
I got my TikTok sound bites somehow, man.
Publicly, I would say Oracle Cerner is my number 1.
Oracle, yep.
And Oracle can stay around. I'm talking about Oracle Cerner specifically, Oracle Health, because their initiative is solely based on revenue, and what they're trying to do is solely based on revenue. The whole deal that they did when they purchased Oracle, when they purchased Cerner, I mean, the antitrust piece, everything that happened in between that purchase. And then they're really, what they've done to our veterans and to our service members in terms of utilizing their data and things of that nature is really what bothers me with them. So I would love to see them fail in many respects. But, that goes without saying that, will they ever fail? Probably not, because they have this too big to fail kind of mentality.
Too big to fail. Yeah.
But I think even if they don't fail, I think it's worthwhile us having a real conversation about it and being fully transparent about the reality of what they're doing. And what they're doing is not helping anybody.
Absolutely. Okay, so number 2.
Sure.
And we're going to switch this up a little bit because normally we have venture capital guests on here, but we're switching it up for season 2. So what advice would you give to somebody looking to follow a similar career path to you, who is, let's say, 16, 17, 18, at that early stage in their life? What would you tell them?
As cliche as sound, follow your passion. Don't be afraid to fail. I think that's the biggest thing that holds a lot of people back is the constant fear of like, if I do this, then
the failure,
what's going to happen? Or if I don't, right? And the thing is, it's like, you'll never really understand what it's like unless you do it, unless you try it. So I always tell people to just jump out there and do it. Jump off the cliff, have some faith, have a God of faith, have some level of faith, but also have faith in yourself to do it. Because that's really what's going to get you there. I mean, you can get all the degrees, you can get all the coursework done, you can get all of the, whatever you want that you need to get done. You can get all of that and still be mediocre or not do anything at all, right? And so you just got to jump off the cliff and do it.
Yeah, no. And I mean, I think that's good advice because, look, if you're 16, 17, 18, anytime before like 25, 26, like what's your risk? You move back home with your parents for a few months,
Right.
like life will be fine on the other side of that.
Right.
So that's something to always consider. All
Yeah.
right. So next up, what is your biggest regret in your career so far, and what would you change if you could go back and change it?
Um, I don't know if I have any sincere regrets at this point.
All right.
I would say that, because I don't look at regrets like everybody else would, like, oh, I could have done this better. I look at them as lessons. I look at them as opportunity to grow. And I utilize those to kind of propel my next process, right?
Yeah, your
Like,
next
what's next? What's
vision,
my
and
next
it's
vision?
learning.
It's all
So,
learning.
which is this is the growth mindset,
Yeah.
and that's what is very important to succeed in entrepreneurship, venture, any industry.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that you don't have regrets; you take them as learning experiences.
Yeah, I mean, they're all learning
Now,
experiences for sure.
what's the biggest learning experience you've had so far?
Oh, there's been many. I would say the biggest learning experience I've had thus far has been the trust within relationships when you're raising capital and when you're
Yep.
engaged in those kind of dialogues. Trust no one, right? As sad as that sounds, it's very difficult to say that.
Lesson of the year: trust no one. Vince Lopez,
yeah,
Parker
literally.
Health.
No,
We're gonna
right.
put that across the board.
No,
yeah,
literally.
no.
Trust no one, because in the reality is that you're trying to bring alive a vision that very few people understand or want to understand. And
Yep.
it's very hard to have this dialogue when you're raising capital. It's very difficult for you to be engaged in these dialogues and have these people sit here and ridicule you on every piece of everything. I mean, so much so that they went down to the color schematics that were used in the pitch deck. Right.
All right, that's bullshit
right.
for starters.
But like,
yeah,
you just think about that.
We'll unpack that on another podcast. That's insane.
When you think about that, and I always say, trust no one in this, because this is your vision, this is your mission. But you have to build a team that you can have some level of trust. But at the end of the day, everybody is out for themselves in this world, and everybody's even more out for themselves in the venture capital world. And in an industry like ours in healthcare, right? It just, it's shark eating minnows and minnows becoming sharks. Right? It's kind of what that is.
Absolutely, man.
So
that's absolutely no. I am a big believer. There's a image I have bookmarked on my phone of this dude from high school. Who one day he Snapchatted me this picture and said, "Just trust zero hoes."
Right.
It was out of the blue, but whether that's venture capitalists or anyone in the ecosystem. Trust zero hoes, man.
Right.
Trust zero hoes.
All
right. Last question.
Sure.
2024, 2025, looking ahead. One word, how are you feeling?
Extremely optimistic.
That's 2 words.
Optimistic. Optimistic. Does a compound word work? Like fired up? Like I don't know.
No, just optimistic.
No.
We're gonna optimistic. I too am cautiously optimistic for the years ahead.
Yeah.
Vince, been an absolute pleasure having you on.
Likewise, man. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me.
And I'm excited to follow the journey and see where we end up. Hopefully both of us are, we're both running circles around our Club 33 membership next year. So
as long as we get a selfie with Mickey, then we're in the game,